I'm Rachel Horgan. Join me each episode as I sit down with a guest co-host covering the latest business stories in the Seattle area. We'll read the news so you don't have to. This is The Weekly. Okay, hello everybody. Thanks for sticking with me on the solo episode last week. I got a lot of people reached out and said that they liked it, so that made me feel good. Also, I was saying how I didn't want to inconvenience somebody and ask a guest the day before recording, only give them 24 hours, and then oddly, people kind of found out that I had this cancellation, and 4 people reached out to me and said, if that ever happens again, I'm happy to jump in. So one person's inconvenience is another one's pleasure, I guess. But that was fun. It was definitely a new challenge for me, and I learned a lot. And so, yeah, I might be doing another one. It sounded like people liked the idea of doing a news where they now update. So that will be coming. The other thing is this weekend I worked at the Fremont Oktoberfest, which is a kind of this beer festival in Fremont. And, I thought I was a strong person, but have you ever lifted a keg? Have you lifted a keg, Gordon?
Yes.
It's
and I was
heavy.
much younger and stronger.
My body is beat up, so it was like 10 miles walking each day, 14-hour days. But anyway, the voice you just heard was Gordon McHenry Jr., President and CEO of United Way of King County. He's my guest today. Hello.
Good morning. Good morning.
Yes, it's morning. So typically I record in the afternoon, so we'll see how I do with the English language this morning. But we're recording here at the World Trade Center, Seattle. Shout out to World Trade Center and to Allison Scott for letting us use this space. Do you want to tell them why we had to shift from your office?
Yes, we have an office in downtown Seattle, and it's recovering from a under pressure flood, a break in our HVAC system, which flooded 3 out of 4 floors. So we're currently dislocated.
3 out of 4 floors.
Yes.
Gosh darn. How long has that been? Is it?
We're doing a paced recovery, so it's been since late May.
Yeah.
And the building's pretty much repaired, but now the question is, what about the system that broke in the first place? What do we do about that? So we're going to be remote for a few more months as we.
Yeah.
It's a 1921 building, so I think it's showing its age.
To be expected. Yeah. Luckily, we can all work remote. So a little background about you. You've been the president and CEO for 5 years. And prior to that, you were the president and CEO of Solid Ground, which is an anti-poverty nonprofit. And you were the executive director at Rainier Scholars, another local nonprofit here. And I have to mention, before all of this nonprofit work, the director of external affairs at Boeing.
That is accurate. That is accurate.
I feel like you might have some opinions to share later on this episode.
Yes, I do. And if you ask, I will share.
Oh, I can't wait. So before we dive into the articles, for those that aren't familiar with United Way of King County, to me, I feel like I recognize the logo and I know that it does good things. And I think that's kind of like what most people know. But what can you say more about that?
I appreciate that you are aware of United Way. And like many people, maybe not confident as to what we do. We do a lot. All of our work is rooted around the recognition that we live in a society that has lots of inequity that's based upon race, gender, other forms of identity, and we have systems that perpetuate harm. And so we work a lot in terms of basic needs, food, hunger, avoiding hunger, that is housing stability, which is, we can talk about that, but that's our view of the appropriateness of keeping people in their homes as a way of providing stability and mitigating against homelessness. And so we do a lot of work in the basic needs, and we also work to change those systems that harm people, oftentimes at the intersection of income and identity, or race, ethnicity, gender, and place. And there are about 1,030 United Ways across the United States and Canada. And we're the privileged to be the one that serves Greater King County.
I love it. And so I kind of mentioned your history. You have a lot of background in nonprofit, but originally was at a for-profit over at Boeing. So why are you passionate about working in that space?
For me, it's about that recognition of equity and the fact that that is something that is still to be desired in our country, in our region, and I'm called to service. I think I learned that from my parents, and in terms of our family, our neighborhood, our church, and I have this ability to not say no when asked, to be of service. And I'm a recovering lawyer, so I started off as a lawyer even before the external affairs. And so now I say that I'm a social justice advocate. I'm no longer a practicing lawyer, but I definitely advocate on issues and with and on behalf of people who are struggling. And United Way is a great place to do that work.
Definitely. Well, Seattle's lucky to have you. So we've got 4 stories for you today. We're going to do a little bit of a Boeing update. I covered it in the last episode, so if you don't know what's going on with that, go back and listen to the last one, and then we're going to talk a little bit more about it today. Then we've got some Bellevue affordable housing updates, and then we're going to talk about downtown, some stay-out zones that are starting, and some lights that have been there. And then Zulily is being sued over layoffs. Man, Zulily just keeps hitting the news cycle, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. So those are our 4 stories, and we're going to start with Boeing. So this is a kind of a continuation of the conversation with myself last week. But what was so great, I was trying to do some research on what, when I choose articles, I choose some of the ones that are just really obvious of what's big news in Seattle. And then I try and find some that are related to the guest and what they'd be interested in. And lucky for me, Gordon, you write opinion pieces for newspapers. So when I search your name, I can just find an article. So this one you wrote recently, it was before the union had rejected Boeing's deal. And you wrote this article saying, I really hope they accept this deal because I think it'll be good for them. So I'm going to turn it over to you. You can have the floor, what was a little bit more about that opinion piece and why you wrote it?
I had a 21-year career with the Boeing Company, a lawyer, customer services, senior executive, where we did some logistics works with airline customers, marketing, and then the last 7.5 in external affairs. And I think a lot of people almost take for granted the benefits of having the Boeing Company either headquartered here in Greater Seattle or having a very large presence. And so part of the reason why I wrote the opinion piece with a friend, Phyllis Campbell, who I've known for decades, was we benefit from having Microsoft, Amazon, Starbucks, Zulily, Alaska Airlines, and people I think just sort of ignore and sometimes take for granted the aerospace
kind of see
industry.
It like the big bad corporations taking over. There's some negativity there. I see.
Oh, there's definitely. Boeing has dug themselves a big hole. I think our opinion piece identified that it's a deep, deep hole, and I think that's one of the struggles they're dealing with right now. That what may appear to be a reasonable offer, which the union evaluated and rejected, I think is in part Boeing has to deal with the reality that 12 to 14 years is a long time to expect people to abide by a previously negotiated agreement. And so I think Boeing's dealing with, in our area, in our world, we talk about head and heart, or head, heart, and hands, that when you evaluate an issue, an opportunity, I think Boeing's got a heart issue that's just as dominant as the head issue. So the economics are there right in front of people, and there's a lot of emotions because Boeing's dug a deep, deep hole. And so so you write this article, you say, I hope that they accept the deal, and then obviously we know they didn't accept the deal. So correct.
Are you surprised by that? Or are you disappointed by that?
My eyebrow went up with hope when I read that it was a tentative agreement before what we call a best and final offer, where one person says, this is it, we're done. So I was like, that bodes well. And then, of course, a few days later, we realized that's just a continuation of the conversation. And so I think not surprised, not disappointed, but still hopeful that the union and the employer will come together soon so that everybody can get back to work, and this region can continue to benefit from an incredible center of expertise. Yeah. So let's put your Director of External Affairs hat on. Yeah. If you were the Director of External Affairs at Boeing today, what would you be doing differently, or what would be going on in your head, and kind of what advice would you be giving Boeing? One thing that's common for politics and is common for human services work is it always is local. And so the Boeing Company is not as local as it was when, and that's LOCAL, not LOCO. It's not as local as when I was there. And if I was them, I would begin to increase the amount of access and messaging and engagement by a very senior exec who's a local senior exec here. Maybe somebody like Stephanie Pope, or the fact that Kelly Orberg, the new president, is as that person gets their feet on the ground. Make sure that people get to know the president who lives right here in Greater King County, but also some other great executives at the Boeing Company. And so help people understand Boeing through some of the senior leaders, and not just through the media or social media, which right now is incredibly negative.
Yeah. I said in my last episode, we know they have a $60 billion debt. So they're kind of saying, we can't really afford to meet your demands. But we also know how much that executive leadership team makes, which, to be fair, that's what a lot of executive leadership at corporations make. Boeing is not unique in that. What would you say, or do you have a comment on kind of the discrepancy of what the union workers are negotiating versus kind of what leadership's making?
The unions, both IAM as well as SPIA, they are powerful. They're organized. They're incredibly bright. And so I think the economics have been there and they are there. And some of what you say is very accurate. There's a gap between senior exec pay and frontline workers pay. And the workers know that. So I think the real thing is to not do things that exacerbate the optics of that reality, and to make sure the offers that are on the table speak to issues that we hear in human services, and I'm sure the union is communicating to Boeing, which is we want family wage jobs. We want the ability to retire and provide for the next retire and live well, and to have something to pass on to the next generation. And so those things sound like retirements. They sound like good benefits. So if you get sick, and so I think that's probably where the expectation is. The optics are there. Yeah. So you have to live with those. Right. And Boeing again has dug a deep hole. But the unions are looking for that long-term assurance that they matter, and that their families matter, and that their next generation matters. And I think if you can speak again to the heart, not just to the head, I'm confident Boeing can get there.
Yeah, they're not going to solve the discrepancy of pay in one negotiation. No. This is like a much bigger issue, but thank you for sharing that. So we're going to move on to the next story, which it's a little sort of related because it's about affording housing. So this is over in Bellevue. The affordable housing developers over there in Bellevue can now apply to have development fees waived or reduced. So Mayor Lynn Robinson over there pushed this forward, and it's going to make it easier for people to develop housing that other people can afford. What I thought was interesting in this article is that to be affordable housing, it has to be affordable for people who are at or below 80% of the median income, which is $78,000 for a single person. Yes. That is considered like low income affordable housing. I mean, this isn't surprising to you because I know you work a lot in the housing, but that was a little surprising to me. So this is definitely your realm, but initial thoughts on kind of this Bellevue initiative. Do you think it's a good solution?
My first and short answer is anything. We have a lack of housing that's affordable, and it throughout Greater King County, actually throughout the region, which is King, Snohomish, Pierce, it may in Kitsap. And so I think anything that helps incentivize more housing that's affordable is a really good idea. And so I've heard, and people who are even more informed than I have tell me, permitting. The cost of permitting, and especially the time to get the permits approved, is a challenge in a very dynamic and expensive industry like building homes, and building homes where some are affordable. And so I think it's great that they recognize that they are behind their own stated goals to have more affordable housing. And so I can't say that it's the only and best strategy, but I think it will help. And I think it helps identify that this needs to be a priority for the citizens of Bellevue. In other words, there's going to be less fees. So there is a financial issue, but the long-term gain is we have a more robust, Bellevue community and a more robust region. We talk about ones that are, and to your point, yes, we are an expensive region. And that is one reason why United Way does the work we do around food insecurity and of course, keeping people in their homes. The reason why it's hard to stay in your home is because it's expensive. And people go through, challenges in terms of their incomes. And so I think the important takeaway for your listeners is we need more stable housing for people who are very low income or no income. We need affordable housing for people who are like they say, the teachers, the nurses, the firefighters. And so on the whole spectrum of housing, there's just not enough of that housing that fits, whether you're extremely low income, you're making some money, you're at 80% AMI at $77,000,
Right.
or somebody who's making $100,000. And it needs to happen throughout the region, not just in Seattle or not just in Bellevue.
Yeah. And is there something specifically that United Way is doing to kind of tackle some of this housing and affordable housing?
For us, we will advocate. We will advocate for strategies and resources that go into affordable housing. Like, for example, here in the city of Seattle, the housing levy, which I think it's our 6th or 7th housing levy. So that's like 30-something years of putting money, voter-approved money to incentivize more housing that's affordable. And I've been on the technical feasibility committee twice. I've chaired the nonprofit approach to that. For us at United Way, we work in that where people are really struggling. So it's not necessarily people who are homeless, but people who are in their homes right now and are unable to pay their rent. And so we've been working on that since the heydays of COVID.
Yeah.
And we continue to do a lot of rental assistance. And so when people say, oh my gosh, we've got, a 23% increase in homeless, we have 40-some thousand people who are homeless, I would tell you that right now we have 13,000 people who are waiting for United Way in partnership with King County and some money from the state to give them rental assistance so they can stay in their home.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And those people have like more than a 40 to 50% chance of becoming homeless within 4 to 5 months if they are evicted because they cannot pay rent. There are a lot of reasons why you might get evicted, but if your inability to pay rent is the reason why you're facing eviction and you're in King County, you're a high probability of becoming homeless. And so that's where we decided to put our energy is focus on prevention and try to keep as many people in this region stably housed where they are so they have the time to build up, and not have to go through all the trauma of becoming homeless. And so that's our contribution to that. And then advocating for, as we talked about, more affordable housing that's affordable, across the board.
Mm-hmm.
And last thing I'll say, and I'll stop talking, is
I love it.
Sometimes I've been reframing your question from affordable housing to housing that's affordable, because a lot of times when I talk to people, they equate affordable housing with what we call permanent supportive housing. Somebody who's on a voucher, a public voucher, like a Section 8 voucher, somebody who's getting a lot of support so they can stay in their home. And you nailed an important issue, is that there are people who are making $77,000, making $80,000, $90,000 who are struggling to either have a home or to stay in their rental right here in King County. And so, yes, that's really important for those who are at the very low income. And if you want a thriving community, there's got to be more housing for people who are middle income or lower middle income.
Yeah. Well, one of my questions was going to say, what do you think the general public gets wrong about affordable housing? And I think that's it. No, honestly, because I think I think you nailed it. Is there anything you want to say about being in charge of anything else about the emergency rental assistance program? Anything else you want the listeners to know?
For your listeners, take time to understand that dynamic. That if you come across or become aware of someone who is unsheltered, they're living on the street, they're living in their car, they're living under their freeway, yes, that is one of our neighbors. Yes, there is something going on in their life. We should all be agonized to see that and want to try to find a way to help, and know that there's a multiplied number of folks who are just a few weeks or a month or two from being in that same situation. And that's the depth of the challenge that exists. And so without the federal dollars that came during COVID, we're now turning to cities and the county and the state and our donors who are in the private sector to support our work around more resources for food and more resources for people to stay in their homes.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to move on here, but I was just going to say, like, with all the tech layoffs that are happening, not everybody has 3 months of rent saved up. And so people are laid off, and we have this, we have an amazing unemployment program here in Washington. But for those that don't know, it does max out after taxes. The most you can get, no matter what you were making before, is $970 per week, which, that's not nothing. That can help people pay rent. But, for me, I was on unemployment for a few months and that did help me pay rent. But I don't have kids. I don't have expensive bills so I was able to do okay. But there's a lot of people that, like you said, it's not this image that we picture in our head of people that are struggling. So,
yeah.
Okay. Now we're going to talk about, we were just in Bellevue and now we're going to travel over to downtown. We've got some new lights on 3rd Ave. People pretty much know, but 3rd Ave is mostly buses only and has become a pretty drug-infested area, a little sketchy. So Mayor Harrell knows this. He's doing what he can. He had this downtown activation plan he announced last year that involved kind of cleanups, graffiti removal, and I guess the lights is part of it. Do you remember, this is a quiz. Do you remember how much the lights cost? Did you see that in the article?
What first came to my brain was $50,000.
Yes. Oh man, you are a lawyer. You did study this. $50,000 for these lights. That seemed more expensive than I thought, but it's good for us to know that just throwing up some lights up there does cost the city some money. The other thing is the Bed Bath & Beyond. We've covered this in a way earlier episode, but that's going to be an art center in 2025. So they're doing what they can. Now, that's one article, and I sent you two because this is all sort of related to downtown. That's 3rd Ave. We have lights. Yay. Now, there's something that got passed called the stay out zones. Have you been heavily involved in this with United Way?
I and we did not choose to get involved in the deliberations around the stay out zones.
Okay, you stood out.
I stood out.
The stay out zones. So basically there's these 6 areas they are naming, like Cap Hill, Belltown, Pioneer Square, that kind of thing. And you can't do drugs there. So if you commit a drug-related crime, you can't enter. And then there's also these stay out prostitution zones. So if you're caught doing sex work, things like that, then you can't be in that zone. And that one's over in Aurora. I think most of us kind of know that area. So I have so many questions, but the article says, research shows this doesn't reduce it. Just saying stay out of here isn't helping. And it does make it really difficult for those people to access services like a food bank or, any other kind of resources that are in that area. In my head, I'm just kind of I don't understand how just saying stay out helps, because then where are they going? A, and B, aren't we already getting them in trouble? Aren't we already arresting them if they're dealing drugs? So what am I missing here, Gordon?
You're not missing. I think your eyesight is quite good, and maybe it's improved because there's lights on 3rd Avenue.
Hey.
I do think attention to lighting. I think attention to graffiti removal. The ambassadors from the downtown service that do the sweeping and directing people when they have questions. I think all that helps. I'm a walker, so our offices, when we're in them, is at 2nd and Columbia. Mm-hmm. But back in the day when I would be in the office, I'd park once and then I'd walk to any other meeting I have in downtown Seattle, or if it's really far, ride the Light Link Rail. So I will walk 3rd Avenue. It's not our area, but I walk 3rd Avenue. I walk it, when the sun's up and when the sun is down, if that's or I walk 2nd Avenue or Western. And I think, so I'd say that in general, our ability as a community to take care of our streets, to, keep them clean, to make them welcoming, which is, lighting could be part of that. I think that's a good strategy. I think it's a good use of city money. And I think it might be more productive than, creating another ordinance that makes it enables the police department to arrest. I have a suspicion that will not be the first place that police are going to go is arresting somebody for loitering or violating the stay out zone. I think we've seen the news that says it's challenging for police to respond to crimes that are much more that are violent, that have a threat of loss of life. And so I sort of wonder, is this a tool that's actually going to be utilized? And I think there is merit to the criticism that you and I have read, that this tends to be a tactic that, if not carefully managed, is oppressive to people who are already marginalized. Marginalized because they present a certain way, marginalized because they don't have a stable place to call home, marginalized because they're dealing with mental or behavioral health, where what they need is a healthcare solution, healthcare support, not an arrest, and not a move along. And so, yeah, we have concerns about that. We didn't lean in. I didn't lean in, and we didn't lean in on this issue. But we're watching this and concerned that this may seem like a good strategy and really doesn't address the underlying issues, which we have a lot of people who need access to help. They need to trust. They need to have access, to be aware of it, have access to healthcare, mental health, behavioral health, and to be able to trust that the person that works with them has their best interests in mind. And a lot of that is hard when you don't trust your neighbors, you don't trust the system, and you feel like you've been oppressed. Wherever you go, there's somebody judging or moving you along. And so I think that's going to be the challenge in these zones. So I will say more lighting, great.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, I think that, none of us wants that. None of us wants drug use or, any kind of issues or crime on that street. But, just saying, get out of here. I don't know. I don't know if that's the best solution. Right. So it's kind of got to come at it in a lot of different ways. Mm-hmm. But speaking of, has United Way of King County, is there some sort of project that they're doing? Any examples you have of what you have done in the past or are working on for improving downtown? Or are you kind of more bigger picture?
Bigger, yes, and. So definitely want to serve the entire county. We start with our communities of color, and we start with and those who are enduring long-term existence on very low incomes or no income. For us, one thing that we do intentionally is when we do free tax. And so when we have like 26 to 30 sites in partnership with other organizations, we definitely have those sites in downtown Seattle, a lot of times with the library and international districts, so that folks have a way to get the refunds they're entitled to. They may not even realize they have
you'll do like a tax, you'll do their taxes for them.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Basically about to the same level that you described earlier. Up to about 70 or 80% AMI, we'll do a free tax for you. So that's federal refunds. It's also the Washington State Working Family Tax Credit, which can be up to around $1,500, I think, now. And so we want to get that money back into people's hands, and that helps them with their rent, helps them with their food. It also is a great way to, if somebody is willing to let you do your taxes, that's a great way to start a relationship that may actually, well, we may not be the service provider, but we can refer them to somebody because we're seeing aspects and we're in that moment of relationship and say, oh yeah, well then have you thought about going over here to get some help here? Have you thought about this benefit that you may not be aware of? And so our staff that do that, that is a lot of what they do. Let's get the money that you're entitled to. And since we're here having this conversation, what else can we or the community do to help make your life a little better?
Right. And starts the conversation, starts the relationship. Right. Yeah. I got mine done for free when I was in my 20s, college and 20s. San Diego State was offering it. Yeah. And I think that was students, but it was, the teachers were overseeing it.
Yeah, it's a great program. And it's one where we use the volunteers, a lot of volunteers to do that.
Anything else you want to say about stay out zones and lights and things in downtown?
Not right now.
You almost said something controversial. I can see it.
Like I said, I'm a walker, and so and I do that intentionally to stay grounded, literally, not to make a pun, and to what's going on, because you can be in your car and be very isolated, and the issues that people are concerned about in downtown, they exist throughout the county. And so there is this concept of, center city makes a difference, for a lot of reasons. The tourism, the social services, the public sector services, courts and libraries, but libraries everywhere, so which is a good thing. So I do wonder, again, is this a good strategy for the city of Seattle? One that's going to have the desired results. And I also wonder if this gets replicated, what does that say about, again, efforts that may not have the intended benefit? There's a person that's a really wise person. He said, most of us are called to service and we want to do good. But if you're thinking about how challenging it is working inside of a society that has systemic issues, maybe what you're doing is trying to do less harm every day when you engage with somebody with the intent to do good, perhaps what you're really trying to do is make sure you don't cause them more harm.
Yeah.
And so maybe that's my indirect answer to these stay out zones is I'm concerned that in the intent to do good, we may be causing harm.
Yeah. No, well said. Okay, our last one is Zulily. So former Zulily employees are doing a class action lawsuit. Oh, this is perfect. You can tell me all about the law against Zulily. So, which shut down earlier and was sold to originally private equity and then the Bed Bath & Beyond. They are saying that they didn't receive the mandatory 60-day notice. So if you're being laid off, you have to get 60 days notice, or in lieu of notice, you can get pay. So they're saying that they didn't do either of those things. I'm not going to go all into the history of Zulily. Maybe that'll be a special episode at one point, but they were founded in 2009. Mm-hmm. They went public and were valued at $2.6 billion. And then in 2015, Liberty Interactive, which kind of does those home shopping network things, they acquired it for $2.4 billion. Then so things are going well. And then they sell it to Regent, a private equity, in 2023, and things go downhill. And they liquidate it and sell to Beyond, which is Bed Bath & Beyond. So that's kind of a little bit of the history.
We used to have a storefront on 3rd Avenue.
Oh, yeah, they used to have a storefront. That's right. What are your kind of law opinions here?
Well, a wise lawyer would say, everybody can bring a lawsuit, allegations are made, but there's a process to either settle or reach an adjudication. So we're still early in this process. If this was an active organization as opposed to one that has gone out of business, clearly you want to try to resolve issues, especially with employees or former employees, because it's better for your reputation.
But yeah, at this point, they don't care. Like, okay,
right,
and no reputation to uphold.
Right, yeah. So I think that one puts a little bit of a different spin on it. Yeah. I think in both in for-profit and nonprofit, layoffs do happen, and no one wants a layoff. No one likes it. No one thinks it's fair or reasonable, and so I think a lot of it is how do you, how much, whether required by law or by your own sense of your organization's values, how much advance notice can you give a person or the organization that you're going through a time period when layoffs are a strategy that's going to be utilized. And then I think you really wanted, to your point, work with the affected individuals. And so what can you do to put some money with them as they leave? Can you convert your, unused unused vacation time into cash? Is there a severance, whether you're a nonprofit or for-profit, that can be utilized? To your point, make sure that they don't contest, that there's no contest in terms of unemployment. Can you make an offer? Can you help a person quietly find that next step? If it is a layoff and it's not like getting rid of, there's not like a personnel conflict or failure to do the work, but it's a layoff, that probably means it's somebody who was adding value and you've had a hard economic. So I think it's working with the hard economic choice. And so it's working with the individual to give them as much notice, to soften the time period when they're unemployed, and to, if you can, provide them with some support as they get that next place, the next employment. Yeah,
I'm not too surprised. So in the article, it said that apparently Zulily, or the owners of Zulily, were trying to find some sort of loophole where they didn't have to give notice and didn't have to give pay. Yeah. And that feels shady to me, of like they were intentionally trying to figure out how to not give these employees money. But I'm not surprised, because they weren't the owners of, they weren't the founders. They weren't in the company. They just bought it to them. It's just a transaction. So of course they're trying to find the cheapest way to do it. So we'll have to watch that closely and see what happens. But we're wrapping up here. But before we close, I always ask kind of what the best advice you've ever received is, or if you have your own advice to give to the audience.
I was thinking about that as I was coming in to meet you, and I couldn't think of like the best advice ever given. I received a couple pieces of advice this week, so I'll share. One was, we were talking about effective communication. In this case, within United Way, and then to a lesser degree, United Way out to the community, and not to be overly clever, to be mindful how busy people are. And one person, he had a drop the mic advice, and he suggested the real goal is not to be understood. Your goal should be not to be misunderstood. Oh. And so I've been carrying that with me for the last couple of days, and this is probably the fourth time I've said that, because I think there's something powerful there, which is, make sure when you're beginning to communicate that people understand by not being misunderstood. And then hopefully there's an opportunity to provide the context and the conversation. So focusing on not being misunderstood when people are busy, when people are stressed out, when you're getting bombarded with, for me, it's team messages a couple times, then mobile text, lots of emails, and occasionally, thank you, an actual in-person conversation like this.
Yes.
So, avoid being misunderstood. The last one is, I tell people, I don't know where I got it, but I think most humans, they want to be seen, they want to be heard, and they want to be loved, or at least appreciated for who they truly are. And we all carry multiple identities that are true to us, not what society says should be our identity. And I think if we can approach everyone thinking that this person probably wants to be seen, they want to be heard, and they want to be appreciated, and it's my opportunity to learn how they define themselves, how they show up, we'll be a better society.
Yeah. Well, that's a perfect way to close. Thank you, Gordon, for taking the time to meet me, and thank you again to the World Trade Center for hosting us. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Rachel. Good conversation. Let's do it again.
Let's do it. This has been The Weekly, with production assistance from Nick Patry. If you liked what you heard, rate us and write a review on Apple Podcast or Spotify. We love listener feedback, so if you have any story suggestions, comments, or complaints, email us at info@theweeklyseattle.com. Make sure to check back next Sunday for the latest local business news. We'll see you next time.